Hey, if we haven't had a chance to meet yet, my name's Garry. I'm one of the pastors here. Welcome to the meeting place. We're kicking off a new year with a new series called Searching For, where over the next few weeks we're going to be exploring and looking into some of the big questions about life that we oftentimes ask ourselves, like, why am I here? Do I matter? How does God fit into all of this in Nanaimo 2020? Those kinds of questions. But before we get started, I just want to say Happy New Year. Happy New Year. It's hard to believe. I've had a few conversations with people. I don't know what it is. I'm having a hard time believing it's 2020. Maybe because I remember as a kid in the mid-'70s, I'm aging myself here, watching a show called, maybe you watched this, Space 1999. It's like the lamest space show ever, but I remember thinking when I saw that, 1999? I don't even think I'll live that long. I'll never see 1999. It just seems so far away. And the next thing I knew, it was 1999. And the end of not just another year, not just another decade, not just another century, but a millennia. And possibly the end of the world as we know it, right? Do you remember that? Y2K? I mean, it was the thing that was going to shut down all the computers around the world. And all this mayhem would just ensue. You remember how freaked out people were over all of that? Maybe you were one of them. All the panic and angst that built as the clock slowly ticked towards midnight and everyone waited with bated breath. All year throughout 1999, radios and TV programs and advertisements were warning about how all the computers might crash all at once. There was predictions about the power grid going down, how we'd all be just thrown into the dark ages. Planes would fall from the sky because their computer systems would malfunction. Traffic lights would quit working, and there'd be mass confusion and accidents and traffic jams. Banks would lose your account information, and along with it, all your money. Police and firefighters, man, if they asked for a day off, they were probably put in the insane asylum or something. It's just like, no, you're working, man. This is going to be crazy. When the clock strikes 12, it's going to be crazy. People were stocking up on generators, cases of water, cases of food. I remember the church I was working at the time, we had cases and cases of water that we had bought just in case. And then everyone waited with bated breath for the clock to strike 12. And the clock struck 12, and nothing happened. And then, after nothing happened, we all walked around like, I wasn't worried. I knew it was just, there was nothing going to happen anyways, right? As you got cases of water standing behind you. You know, hindsight, as they say, is 20/20, right? Which makes sense, given the definition is the understanding of a situation or event only after it has happened or developed. On January 1st, 2000, we all had 20/20 vision because the potentially catastrophic event that everyone would fear would happen didn't happen. But what we didn't know was what the rest of 2000 would hold for us. So if hindsight is 20/20, then foresight, which is defined as the ability to predict what will happen in the future, foresight is 0/0. We're blind, right? Because we can't predict what's going to happen next year, the next minute, the next hour, the next day. Sure, we can make an educated guess, but that's all it is at best. It's a guess at what we hope will happen, right? Key word there being hope. Dictionary defines hope this way: a feeling of expectation and desire for a particular thing to happen. If I had to give hope a working definition, I would put it this way: hope is the person or thing in which you place your expectations. Hope is the person or thing in which your expectations are placed in or on. And here's what I mean by that. For some of us, our hope is in our job, our career. We're looking that to get us through life. Our hope is in our company that we work for, that they're going to do well, that I'll continue to get a paycheck so I can pay the mortgage and the car payment and my cell phone bill. For others, Our hope is in our investments. We're looking to the stock markets and the TSFAs and everything else. So when we retire, we're going to have the cash to do what we want to do. Some of us put our hope in relationships. And we expect our significant others, our friends, our family, those that are closest to us, to come through for us when life gets tough. No questions asked. They'll just be there. And sometimes we put our hope in ourselves, don't we? You know, our abilities, our smarts, our education to kind of wiggle us out of a jam. And let's not forget promises. Who here hasn't put hope in a promise? Promise of a promotion, promise of a raise, the promise of love until death do us part. You know, to kind of help us frame this, what it looks like, what this whole thing around hope looks like, think of it this way. Picture hope as a ladder, okay? Hope is a ladder. And that ladder, that hope is leaning against something. All of us at some point in our life take our ladder, our hope, and we lean it against something or someone that we think will support our expectations, that will come through for us when the going gets tough. And your ladder, my ladder, your hope, my hope is leaning against something right now. The question is, what is it leaning against? I would suggest most of us couldn't answer that question. Because, and I'll just throw this out there for you to think about, I would say most of us can't answer that question because we don't often think about hope until things begin to feel hopeless. When was the last time you thought about hope? I mean, we talk about it. We use the word hope a lot, don't we? You know, we say things like, man, I hope he or she will like me. You know, I hope we get a seat. I hope the food's hot and good. I hope our plane leaves on time. How about this? When you're making a big decision, you know, to maybe quit work and go back to school or buy a car or a home or something like that, and you share that information with somebody that's close to you, and you say, you know, this is what I want to do, and they look at you and they say, well, I hope you know what you're doing. How about this one? I hear this all the time when I'm driving with my wife. I hope you know where you're going, right? We talk about hope all the time, but we often don't think about hope because we don't think about hope until life turns out differently than we planned and things begin to feel or seem hopeless. And when does that feeling of hopelessness come? It comes when the person or thing that we have leaned our ladder against, put our hope in, doesn't come through for us. And our ladder comes crashing down. I didn't get the promotion. I'm going to be 30 and I'm still single. I'm not going to be able to retire when I thought I was going to be able to retire. You know, in the reality of life, when we face disappointments, because if you walk this planet long enough, you will face disappointment. The question becomes, in whom or what can we place our hope? I'm so glad you asked that question. You guys are so smart. Because there's a story in the Bible found in the New Testament that sheds a powerful light, a powerful truth about where we can safely place our hope. And this story, I love the guy that's in this story because it's centered around this rough, tough, and rather gruff fisherman who wasn't afraid to get up in your grill. Like if he had something to say to you, he'd say it. He'd just get right up there and just let you have it. And more often than not, he spoke and acted before thinking. He'd just jump into a situation. He'd just react to situations just without even thinking. This fisherman, we get evidence of this kind of jumping into things. One day as he's cleaning his nets after a night of fishing, he's been out fishing all night, he's cleaning his nets, Jesus happens to be walking by on the beach, and he looks at him and he says, hey, come follow me. And he does. This fisherman named Simon drops everything and walks away and starts following Jesus. And for the next 3 years, if you read his story, he gets to watch as Jesus performs all these incredible miracles. He was there when Jesus turned water into wine. He watched as Jesus restored sight to the blind, hearing to the deaf, mobility to the lame, as he restored people who suffered with the disfiguring, horrible disease of leprosy. And this surreal adventure just keeps unfolding for him. And one day, Simon moves from just watching, kind of on the sidelines, watching this, to actually participating in helping Jesus pull off these miracles. And one of the ones that he's most famous for, that a lot of us have heard about, is when Jesus feeds 5,000 people, hungry people, with nothing more than 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread. And they got leftovers. And if that's not enough, Simon gets a new name. Jesus changes his name to Peter, which means the rock. I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say that Peter, at this point in his life, is feeling more alive than ever. He's really owning and identifying this new identity as a follower of Jesus. Let's jump ahead in the story to when Jesus and his closest followers are gathered together for what is now known as the Last Supper, their last meal together. And during this last meal, John, another one of Jesus' closest followers, records a conversation that happens between Peter and Jesus. Okay, we're just going to look at a little snippet of this. Here's how it went. They're all in this upper room. Jesus is talking about all this stuff that he's going away, he's going to die, and everybody's like, what are you guys talking about? It's kind of like their Y2K. They're thinking, it's not going to happen. What are you talking about? And Jesus said to them, he said, children, and I love the way he refers to them as children. These are all grown men, and he's like, children, like, relax. And he said, I am with you for only a short time longer. You are going to look high and low for me. But just as I told the Jews, I'm telling you, where I go, you're not able to come. And this is where Peter jumps in. Simon Peter asked, Master, just where are you going? Jesus answered, you can't now follow me where I'm going. You will follow later. Not good enough for Peter. Master, Peter said, why can't I follow you? Maybe that's why he called them children, right? The why question. Why? If you have kids, you know what I'm talking about. And he says, I'll lay down my life for you. Fast forward a few more hours. Jesus has been arrested. He's being interrogated inside the courtyard of the high priest at the time. Peter's there, but he's standing just outside the courtyard. And he's no doubt replaying the events of that evening that have brought him to this point in time. He recalls the after-dinner stroll where Jesus wanted to go to this garden to pray. He remembers the sound of the soldiers' feet as they marched into the garden and grabbed Jesus. And how, without thinking, Peter grabbed his sword and hacked off one of the guards' ears. And now he's standing by a fire trying to make sense of it all. Because since dinner, things have gone into a death spiral. As far as Peter was concerned, the very person that he had placed his hope in, the person he had leaned his ladder against, Jesus, hadn't come through for him. In a lot of ways, you can't really blame him, can you? I mean, from his vantage point, it was over. At this point, Jesus is all but dead. And along with it, any hope that Peter had that Jesus was who he said he was. He saw him as this long-awaited Messiah, the chosen one, this great military leader that was going to come and set the Jewish people free from Roman oppression. And now, he's sentenced to die. And for the first time in a long time, Peter, no doubt, begins to think about hope as he shuffles out of the courtyard, searching for hope in a seemingly hopeless situation. Maybe that's your story. The person or thing that you placed your hopes in hasn't or didn't come through for you. And so you're here. You find yourself here, looking for, searching for hope. One afternoon, a few days after Jesus' death and resurrection, the Easter story, we pick up the story, and Peter said, I'm going fishing. And the rest of them replied, well, we're going with you. They went out and they got in the boat and they caught nothing that night. And when the sun came up, Jesus was standing on the beach, but they didn't recognize him. Jesus spoke to them. Good morning. Did you catch anything for breakfast? Now, I don't know for sure, but I can't help but think that Jesus was being a little facetious there, kind of that sarcastic tone. Did you catch anything last night, by the way? And they answered, no, we didn't catch anything. And he said, well, throw your net off to the right side of the boat. See what happens. And they did what he said, and all of a sudden there were so many fish in the net, they weren't strong enough to pull it in. Then the disciple Jesus loved, and a lot of scholars think that refers to a disciple named John. He says to Peter, Peter, it's him. It's the master. It's Jesus. And when Simon Peter realized it was Jesus, the master, he threw on some clothes. Yes, back then the custom was they fished naked. I'm glad that custom didn't carry forward because I fished on a fish boat for 27 years and I don't even want to have that word picture in my mind. But he was stripped for work and he dove into the sea. So here again, his just impulsiveness, right? Oh, it's Jesus. I'm out of here. Psh, into the water he goes. Leaves all his buddies behind. The other disciples came in by boat. It's like, well, what else are we going to do? Thanks, Peter. And they weren't far from land, 100 yards or so, pulling in the net full of fish. And when they got out of the boat, they saw a fire on the beach with fish and bread cooking on it. Jesus then took the bread and gave it to them. And he did the same with the fish. And then we have this little tidbit, this little line. It says, this was now the third time Jesus had shown himself alive to the disciples since he was raised from the dead. But I love what happens next in this story. Listen to this. After breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Like all of this? Do you love me more than all of this? Yes, Master, you know I love you. Jesus said, feed my lambs. He then asked a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Yes, Master, you know that I love you. Jesus said, shepherd my sheep. Then he said it a third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was upset that he asked for the third time, do you love me? And so he answered, Master, you know everything there is to know. You've got to know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my sheep. And then he said to him, follow me. You know, I smile every time I read those words because my wife and I had similar conversations with our daughters just before they got married. On the day of the wedding, we pulled them aside and we asked them, are you sure you love this guy? And they would say, yeah, I love this guy. And we'd say, are you really sure you love this guy? And they would say, yeah, I'm really sure I love this guy. And then we'd say, are you really, really, really sure you love this guy? And they'd say, yes, I'm really, really, really sure I love this guy. And we'd say, okay, let's get married. Now, we did it not for our benefit. We asked them that for their benefit and that of their husbands. Jesus is doing the same thing for Peter. Jesus wanted Peter to be sure that his love and his hope were leaning not against some vague, ill-placed notion of who he was, some great military leader that was coming to kick some Roman butt, but leaning against who he truly was, God. And that was all proven by the event that changed history, his resurrection. You know, I can't help but relate to Peter's story because I can see parts of me in Peter's story. I can see parts of me in Peter. I put my hope in God when I was quite young, and for a few years, I followed. I guess what you would call followed. But then a strange thing happened. I turned into a teenager. And I gained some independence. I got my driver's license. And a whole new world opened to me. I started going to a bigger school where there was a whole bunch of people from different parts of the town I lived in coming to. And I got exposed to all these different things, this different world that was out there. And so I went off and did my own thing. And what happened is my hope shifted from being in God to being in my relationships, my friendships, the cash in my wallet, my jobs. God was in the picture, but he was kind of on the fringes. You could say my life was like a ship, and I was the one in charge. I was the captain, so to speak. And God, well, he was on the ship, but he was more like a life preserver that I kind of kept stowed underneath the seat, and I only pulled him out in extreme emergencies, like when I really needed help. But over time, that changed through a series of circumstances that I don't have time to get into here, but it ended up with me pulling a Carrie Underwood, in which I said, hey, Jesus, take the wheel, right? I just got to that point where it's like, oh, wow, I just can't do this anymore. I need you. And to make a long story short, that was the beginning of me finding myself employed in a church. And it was a job that I absolutely loved. But without warning, things went sideways. And very quickly, I found myself out of a job and leaving a bunch of people that I loved behind. It absolutely devastated me. I had lost hope. And it was in that state of hopelessness that I wandered into this theater one Sunday morning several years ago. And right here, waiting for me, waiting to meet me, was God. The same God that met Peter on the beach so long ago. And maybe to some degree you can identify with Peter's story or my story. Your ladder has been leaning against something or someone, and they haven't come through for you. It didn't come through for you. And now you're searching for hope in a seemingly hopeless situation. Well, I'm glad you're here because there is hope. And that hope, that never failing, never ending, rock solid, never wavering hope is found in only one place. And that is in the person named Jesus Christ. Yeah, I know we say this a lot around here, and sometimes when we hear things over and over again, it just kind of goes in one ear, kind of spins around and shoots out the other side. But one thing we say around here a lot, and I hope you grasp this, if even just a little bit. Jesus loves you more than you could ever begin to imagine. And he desperately wants to meet you, to have a relationship with you, to have you experience the love that he has for you, experience the peace that comes when we place our hope in him. Not people, places, or things, but him. I want to leave you with some words written by some people who had begun to put their hope in other things. Their abilities, other gods at the time, relationships, all that stuff. And they were feeling hopeless. And God comes along, and through one of his spokespeople out there called prophets, his name was Isaiah, he says, I want you to say these words to my people, to encourage them. And here's what he wrote. Here's what he said. Those who hope in the Lord, who hope in God, not their job, not their investments, not their relationships, not their kids, not their health, but those who hope in the world will renew their strength. And if you've ever felt hopeless, you know how draining that can be. They will soar on wings like eagles. And I can't help but picture that's us flying over top of our problems, seeing them from a different perspective. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. What beautiful words. And if you're here and you're feeling hopeless, that thing that you so desperately hoped to happen didn't happen, and you're searching for hope, remember those words. Because they point to the God, the only place we can put our hope. Really glad you're here, and our prayer is that you're going to be open to exploring, receiving, and actually putting into practice the hope that is found in the unconditional love, grace, and mercy of Jesus. I invite you to pray with me. God, it's just so easy to place our hope in things other than you, our abilities to make money, our relationships, counting on people to come through for us when things are tough. And yes, we can do that, but if that's where we're placing all our hope, we're all fallible human beings. We're going to fail one another. We're going to fail ourselves. But you are rock solid, and you will be there for us. And you backed all of that up with the one event in history that changed everything when you walked out of that grave, forever defeating death. We thank you for that. We thank you for the awesome gift that it is. So just be with us. I just pray that you be with us as maybe we're here grappling, searching for hope right now, that we would find it in you. Thank you for loving us, and we pray this in your name. Amen.